Cry loud, spare not, lift up thy voice like a trumpet, and show thy people their transgressions. Yeah, so I'm a Hebrew Israelite from the tribe of Judah. Yahawashi on our side, so don't try to move us. We got next, and this wicked king is almost over. For our people, edification, my folks, soldiers. Isaiah 58:1, they let the trumpet blow. Hey, we them Hebrew Israelites, it's time to let them know. Say let the trumpet blow, it's time to let them know. We them Hebrew Israelites, it's time to let them know. To cry loud, spare none, show them transgressions. For my people never consider they the real Jews. History stolen with that whip, got our back bruised. Still dying in the ghettos, got us trapped in this matrix. Time to open up your eyes, it's too real. We can't fake it. The Most High is on its way back soon. The whole reason why we went into slavery, cause we broke the commandments. Deuteronomy 28 and 68. Who is this nation of people? Not the seed of Ham, but the seed of Shem. From the bloodline of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Revelation 2 and 9. Don't let these fake Jews tell you a lie. In due time, they all bow down. I wanna get my crown and stand firm in this truth. Ha Mashayach Yahawashi, that's his Hebrew name. Wasn't no J's in the Hebrew letter. So I carry this truth like I carry my sweater in the winter cold. This what you ain't been told. Esau's cover blown. We let the trumpet blow and let all my ox know that you a set apart nation, ain't compared to none. And when the Most High return, these other nations done. Isaiah 14:1, we gon' possess the land, and they gon' try to cleave. And the Most High said it all is book of prophecy, a hard pill to swallow, but when that light shine, it's real bright, and the Most High is our lifeline. So Quam Yasharala, rise, O Israel. Hey Quam Yasharala, rise, O Israel. It's time for you to wake up out your sleep. Romans 13:11, our salvation is near. Lift up thy voice in the streets so the whole world hear. Yeah, so I'm a Hebrew Israelite from the tribe of Judah. Yahawashi, he on our side, so don't try to move us. We got it next. Hey man, this wicked kingdom is almost over. For our people, edification, my folks, soldiers. Isaiah 58:1, say let the trumpet blow. Say we them Hebrew Israelites, it's time to let them know. Say let the trumpet blow, it's time to let them know. We them Hebrew Israelites, it's time to let them know. Hey, let the trumpet blow, it's time to let them know. We them Hebrew Israelites, it's time to let them know. Would you denounce wicked traditions or not? Go to church on pagan Sundays, don't keep the Sabbath at all. That's why we standing on these corners, get this message to y'all. That you living in a wicked world, they knowledge is flawed. Full of satanic practices, the Vatican worship the Black Madonna on the low. While we die from Planned Parenthood, this is woe. Why you think we quoting scriptures, going head up with the beast, spreading righteousness ooze, leaving our enemies duped. This institution is through. We got the spirit of a lion and the power of Yeshaya. There's no way we could expire. I'm on fire. The Messiah is the root of the fire that be all up in my bones. And the prophet ain't respected at his home, but the truth won't stop. Don't try to make us to be wrong. In the scriptures bear witness to the things that we speak. Blow them trumpets, blow them trumpets. We them Israelites, man, and we 12 tribes deep. Hear the message that we speak. Blow them trumpets, blow them trumpets. We them Israelites, man, and we 12 tribes deep. Hear the message that we speak. Well, I'm a Hebrew Israelite from the tribe of Judah. Yahawashi, he on our side, so don't try to move us. We got next, amen.
All right, Most High bless, Most High bless. Okay, excuse me, I'm in my room relaxing. You understand? But Most High bless, brothers and sisters. I have a dear guest, a dear brother I've been known for some time now. A brother who has a warrior's heart, a loving heart, and pardon my language, and don't take no shit either. But he's well skilled in the scriptures. He has many books. I'm asking him to release everything he has today. The spirit of the Most High, what the Most High put on him to release the book. Before we get into that, I heard that No Light got jumped. I don't know if it's true or not. I'm gonna do my due diligence to find out if that happened or not. So if anybody know anything about that, put in the comment section. But this is my brother Yeshaya. Hey man, welcome to F.O.P.E for our people edification, to edify. That's what we all about over here, edifying the people, man. So tell us more about yourself, brother, before you go into your lecture.
Shalom, can I be heard?
Yes, sir.
All right, first and foremost, giving honor and praise unto the Most High, the one who sees all and is not seen, the one who judges all and is not judged. That's who we're talking about, first and foremost. My name is Yeshaya Yisrael, been in the understanding of Israel since I was a baby. I'm now over the age of 40. I started out, and those who do know and understand, the brothers OT, or what you will call Tanakh base, if we will. And one of the things that we want to point out for reference purposes is that the foundation of the scriptures is in the Torah. And the Torah is what the children of Israel was given after they left up out of the land of Egypt. Now, it says in Exodus that this shall be the beginning of your months, in Exodus chapter 12. So we already know that there's a focal point and a pinpoint where Israel was. Most Israelites find out by reading secular history along and accompanied with the prophecies that we see in Deuteronomy, the 28th chapter. So with that being the case, brothers and sisters, what we want to sit there and talk about is Israelite history from the ancient time to the present time. A brother does not claim to know everything. But what we want to point out for reference purposes is that this knowledge is something that was supposed to have been suppressed. This knowledge was supposed to have been never known. Remember when we read in the scriptures, in Psalm the 83rd chapter, where it distinctly says the nations hold crafty counsel to cut the name of Israel off, that it be no more in remembrance. So when they deal with their crafts, their witchcraft, their any other kind of craft that they deal with to try to make sure we don't come to this truth, we have then been given, sadly, according to the prophecy of Deuteronomy, the 28th chapter, bywords. Bywords such as Negro, bywords such as African American. Jesse Jackson was the one who in the 1980s made that terminology popular. Africa, for all intents and purposes, was either named by and or after Scipio Africanus. Some people say it wasn't, but you can't go, correct me if I'm wrong, into any Hamitic language, any Hamitic culture where they had an entire name for that entire continent. So we could tell by colonization and other aspects how that continent itself got that particular name. Now, how does that tie in to what we're talking about, brothers and sisters? And that's this. Israel is said by many to be either in geographical location of Western Asia and or Northern Africa. There are periods in the scriptures where the Israelites was mistaken for what we would know and understand as to be Hamites. Now we know Hebrew, Ham is said as Ham. Ham, brothers and sisters, all right, I'm going to type it into the chat, all right? In Hebrew means warm or hot. So one of the things we want to point out in that particular case is that the children of Israel were among, not by seat line, because the Most High severed Israel from the nations in Leviticus 20, but was among different nations, among Canaanites who were Hamitic, among Philistines. The Philistines in history in part was called the Pileset. The Pileset was called the Philistines in the scriptures when you go scripturally in the book of Judges. So that's how you can tell the geographical location of where the land of Israel was. The Philistine land was not in the Western Hemisphere. So there's no way that Jerusalem is in Peru, like some have been claiming. There's no way that Jerusalem is in Utah, like some have been claiming, because the geographical location of the land of Israel is pointed out in Numbers 34. It's pointed out in Joshua 15. It's pointed out in the book of Jeremiah 4, as well as in the book of Daniel chapter 7. So these are just things we want to point out in that particular case. Now, I'm familiar with the aspect that I want to, I want to point this out on a human level. My history teacher, who I will be citing, is a teacher that came from a Tanakh camp that was called Benazakim. And for those who know the history of Israel, say back in the 70s. And what I want to point out, brothers and sisters, is my history teacher, main one, his name, may he rest in peace, was Chief Simeon of the tribe of Judah. All right, so along with that, a brother, no disrespect, not trying to sound haughty, has been on different channels. I've been on Maccabees TV. I have my own particular channel. As the brother, Elder Qanath, stated, I've met him personally. We've known each other, conversed with each other, so forth and so on. And I want to say that it is indeed an honor, brothers and sisters, to even be asked to speak upon the history of Israel in this particular case. Now, brothers and sisters, I want to show, we've seen this picture before, right? From Jerusalem into Western Africa, right? For those who've seen it. This was,
we can see
what
it.
you see over here.
Mm-hmm.
The migration pattern of the Israelites from the land of Assyria going into Northern Africa. Then you see the migration pattern centuries later of Israelites that went into Western Africa. I am going to ask, and I'm going to read it, right? We're going to start reading in the scriptures to let the book speak for itself. We're going to read in Jeremiah chapter 50, if we will, to start off in this particular case. In the genre of this, if I can be heard, let me know. All right, type in a 1 or whatever like that, because I can't hear myself. But the genre of this is to cover 2 aspects. 1, the children of Israel was mistaken as people who were Hamites. So for the lack of a better term, Israelites in the ancient world today would be known as black people. 1. Secondly, the racial identity of the children of Israel did not change over the course of time. So that's something else that we want to point out in this particular case. If I can be heard in the chat, give me a 1. I'll type it in so it can be seen, at least from my end, because I can't hear myself. Thank you, my brother, F.O.P.E. All right, so we're going to go and read Jeremiah chapter 50, verse 17. All right, to let the book speak for itself. Israel is a scattered sheep. The lions have driven him away. First, the king of Assyria hath devoured him, and last, this Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, had broken his bones. So let's look at that, for instance. You had 2 kingdoms that were spoken about. Assyria, which came to power, in this case, under Tiglath-Pileser. Tiglath-Pileser was called King Pul or King Pulu of Babylon, for those who know the history. All right, we're talking 740, 735 BCE. So we're talking, now this is the year 2021. So we're talking over 2,500 years. You read about Tiglath-Pileser. After him, you read about Sargon, Sennacherib, as well as prior to that, Shalmaneser. So brothers and sisters, in this particular case, when you go in your own time, we're going to go into it briefly. You read about the names of the Assyrian kings that took over the Israelites, that captured the Israelites, brothers and sisters. So that way it can be noted for edification purposes. Assyria fell to Babylon, brothers and sisters, as time went on. When the Assyrians fell to the Babylonians, what do we see, brothers and sisters, in that particular case? We want to point this out, if we will, right? Look at this here. This here that you're seeing is a picture of the impalement of Israelites that came from the city of Lachish that you read of in the book of Kings, chapter 18.
Good.
And this here is a black man hung in America. So, as this book points out, from Assyria to America, the captivity that sadly happened upon us as a people. So, when Babylon came to power, Israelites sadly became, to a certain extent, hand-me-down slaves. Let's go, if you will, to Lamentations, to chapter 2, verse 5. Now, some people say Lamentations was written by Baruch, who was the scribe of Jeremiah. Some people say Lamentations was written by Jeremiah himself. But we do know good and well where we're talking about. In Lamentations 2, verse 5, it says this: Yah, the Most High, was as an enemy. He has swallowed up Israel. He has swallowed up all her palaces. He hath destroyed his strongholds, and have increased in the daughter of Judah mourning and lamentation. So Judah and Israel, certainly by the time Babylon came up as a kingdom, was both known being into captivity. That's what we want to point out, because we want to also, in this intro, so what we're going to get into is talk about the aspect that has been circulating of the 12 tribe charts, as well as discussing the matters of the Israelites in history. Now, this is not to say that there were not Israelites in, quote, the Americas, say prior to the Atlantic slave trade, because the Most High said he would scatter Israel from one end of the earth to the other. When we speak upon our particular story as the quote-unquote West Indian, quote-unquote African American, we are talking about our immediate one. I pointed out and I asked brothers and sisters regarding the saying or the understanding of the said Hispanics of being Israel. I asked in this book right here, Deuteronomy 28, 15 to 68. I asked in this book here for them to go into the history and expound upon it, like we're going to do regarding the said Black history and how that can be tied into the said subject. In Jeremiah 50, verse 33, it says this. We are in Jeremiah 50, verse 33. It says this: Thus saith the Lord of hosts, the children of Israel and the children of Judah were oppressed together, and all that took them captives held them fast. They refused to let them go. So, brothers and sisters, the children of Israel and the children of Judah. So let's talk about briefly the circulation of the 12 tribe chart that we see today. The chart that says the said African American is the tribe of Judah. And the said chart that says that the said Haitians are the tribe of Levi. That the said Dominicans are the tribe of Simeon. That says that the said Mexicans are the tribe of Issachar. And as stated, we're going to, as Israelites, our primary source will be this book. Not the book I wrote, but the book our ancestors wrote. Not the teaching that came from a camp, but from the teachings that come from out of the scriptures right here. In Israel, the scriptures talk about our diaspora. Let's get into it for edification purposes. We've already read in the era of Jeremiah, brothers and sisters. We've already read in the era of Jeremiah that Israel and Judah was held captive by the Assyrians and the Babylonians. All right? So we can't separate Judah and Israel as if Judah only went to Babylon and Israel was taken into Assyria. Such was not the case, point blank. And we're going to go into 2 Kings 18 for this. Let us let the book speak. And thank you, brother or sister, because I don't know who Lima is, for citing where I'm reading at. Thank you so much. Star, and Lima, because I see y'all did that. I appreciate it. But we're going to now go into 2 Kings chapter 18, and we're going to read in verse 13 to let the book speak for itself. All right? And it says the following. Now in the 14th year of King Hezekiah, did Sennacherib, king of Assyria, come up against all the fenced cities of Judah and took them. And Hezekiah, king of Judah, sent to the king of Assyria to Lachish, saying, I have offended. Return from me. That which thou puttest on me will I bear. And the king of Assyria appointed unto Hezekiah, king of Judah, 300 talents of silver and 30 talents of gold. Let us confirm this scripturally. Let us go to the prophet Isaiah, chapter 36. In the scriptures, in Isaiah 36, verse 1. Now it came to pass in the 14th year of King Hezekiah that Sennacherib, king of Assyria, came up against all the defense cities of Judah and took them. So now, brothers and sisters, what are we pointing out? That there were people of the tribe of Judah that was taken into the Babylonian captivity. Pardon me. Judah taken into the Assyrian captivity. Judah, the kingdom / Judah, the tribe, has to be understood. And again, we're going to let the scriptures speak. Let us go into the scriptures. Because we know after Solomon, right, the kingdom was divided. According to the words of the Most High, through the prophet Ahijah, or Achiyah. Achiyah, meaning Yah is my brother. All right, or brother of Yah, or Ahijah the prophet, who went to Jeroboam, the son of Nebat, and having a garment cut up in 12 pieces, gave Jeroboam 10 pieces, saying that you're going to get 10 tribes. So let us look, if we will, brothers and sisters, and let the scriptures speak. Not my camp, my teacher, my book, his ideology. We're letting it speak.
That's right.
And this is our point source, right? So let that be noted for edification purposes. That's why I like citing my sources. We are going to go, if we will, to the book of 1 Kings chapter 12. 1 Kings chapter 12, verse 17. Now this is after Solomon died. This is when Rehoboam, the son of Solomon, who wasn't the brightest person, took the throne. But as for the children of Israel, who dwelt in the cities of Judah, Rehoboam reigned over them. So we know that Solomon died, according to many timelines, brothers and sisters, in the 10th century BCE. Judah was taken into Babylon as a kingdom, tribe, in two aspects. One being 597 BCE, which you read of in 2 Kings chapter 24. And the other during the reign of King Zedekiah in the year 586 BCE. So what do we gather? Assyria is up, Assyria falls to Babylon. Judah and Israel was taken into Assyria. But we have to remember, as we read in the book of Kings, that there were Israelites of the northern tribes living in the southern kingdom of Judah. So now by the time Babylon comes during the era of Jeremiah the prophet, and we read in Lamentations, Judah and Israel being thinking that the Most High is an enemy to them by sending them to Babylon. So what are we saying in a nutshell? You had Judah and Israel in Assyria. When Assyria fell, Babylon came up as a power under Nabopolassar, the father of Nebuchadnezzar, in the Chaldean era of the 11th dynasty of Babylon, which you can confirm in Babylonian records. Then we want to point this out for edification purposes, as we will, brothers and sisters. So there won't be no misunderstanding of where we're coming from and what we are talking about, brothers and sisters, all right? This here, as many Israelites have seen, is a picture of Israelites in Assyria. You may want to take notice of their cornrows, brothers and sisters. There's one set of people who can sit there and plait their hair like that. we want to point this out. Isaiah the 3rd chapter says that the daughter of Israel, the Most High will smite with the scab, baldness on the daughters of Judah. And instead of well set hair, there shall be baldness. So who is known for having baldness among the women? Instead of well set hair. Now, when you deal with Hebrew with the vowels, right? It says in Isaiah 3, Ma'aseh mikshe, which means Ma'aseh from asa, meaning to do or to make. Mikshe from kwasha meaning difficult. Who has the difficult hair to deal with outside of the black woman? So who was the woman in Isaiah 3 that it says shall be smitten with baldness? Who has the hair when sisters do have her hair in plaits? Who goes and sits in the salon 2 and 3 hours? Or as my daughter, who sits 5 and 6 hours on her memorial to sit there and have the Fulani or the African woman do her hair? Who has to wake up in the morning an hour earlier to get her hair done besides sisters? Other women from the other nations, they just take their finger here and just move on. So Isaiah talking about the baldness instead of well set hair, we can pinpoint, sign, who's it talking about? And we want to point this out as so among many people. This is also what Sennacheribs matter. These are Israelites of the tribe of Judah or the kingdom of Judah, and that's the Assyrian leader that you see there. Sorry, my finger went to the wrong spot. So we want to point that out. That hairstyle, you know what it looks like? Don't take this the wrong way. Back in the 1990s, when brothers used to start getting their hair braided, they get the rubber bands and they get the little Afro puffs. That's what that looks like on this Sennacherib wall. So you already got Israelites mistaken as Africans or Hamites. From Genesis 50, you have situations in which Israelites were calling themselves Hebrews and at times calling others Hebrews. In the book of Samuel 14. Brothers and sisters, the Hebrews inside of Egyptian records were called the Apiru. Now, we're not jumping all over the world, but what we're going to pinpoint to is the Apiru or the Kabiru that you see in the Era and Brooklyn Papyrus of ancient Egypt. The people whom they held as captives had afros. The white man didn't really get into Egypt until the time of Alexander. So we're going to get into that as time goes on in this presentation. So, brothers and sisters, that was an intro of what we want to talk about for reasonable purposes. All right? Again, on a human level, giving a shout out to the people who are in the chat, giving a shout out to the camp F.O.P.E. Again, it is an honor and a privilege to even be asked to speak upon said subject. Brothers and sisters, when we deal with the aspects of this chart that you see here. Now, this is no knock, no disrespect on any camp whatsoever. No camp has all the truth. No teacher knows everything. And I'm going to say here as a Tanakh brother, so-called said Old Testament based, I got my first Apocrypha from the guys on ISUPK when they used to teach over on 42nd Street and 8th Avenue. Those who know New York, that's by the bus depot. I got my introduction into the book of Maccabees in Sirach from Israelites that came from ISUPK before the split happened in the year 2000. I got my first Apocrypha at the age of 17 from them. Before there were different splits in this school, and this teacher and that teacher. When it was all one under UPK, Universal Practical Knowledge, when they used to be on, for those who know New York City, 44th and Broadway, Fulton, downtown Brooklyn, 42nd and 8th, Fordham Road in the Bronx, Jamaica Avenue in the Coliseum block in Queens. For those who are familiar with New York City, I'm talking the era of the 1990s. So, regardless of the fact that that's not the schools I came from, give respect where respect is due, because it's the Most High who is the dispenser of knowledge, not your teacher. Isaiah chapter 30, verse 22. Again, we're going to read that before we get to the crux of this lesson here. In the book of Isaiah, chapter 30, verse 22, it reads on this wise. Sorry about that. I had to turn the page. Ye shall defile also the covering of thy graven images of silver, and the ornament of thy molten images of gold. Thou shalt cast them away as a minstrel's cloth. Thou shalt say of it, get thee hence. Now, why did I read that part? Because Israel has dropped the ball. Israel has not stepped up to where we could and should have been. And the Most High doesn't change. And this is not saying I'm a prophet. If Israel in the wilderness did not see their purpose and being brought out, you don't see the vision? Bye-bye. Everybody that's 20 years old and upward, you shall die in this wilderness. The Most High don't change. I was speaking with my lady, my queen, and she was telling me that, I'm paraphrasing, when a person reaches a certain age, over 30, and you're still wondering like which way is up, sometimes you just got to say good riddance. That's what the Most High did with the generation that came up out of Egypt. So the generation that came in Israel under Joshua, their elders were 59 years old and younger. Because everybody that was up besides Joshua and Caleb who had no courage, we grasshoppers in our own sight. The Most High took them, slay them. You don't see where your vision is at. You don't see the purpose and the goal in this. The Most High fired them perpetually. The Most High removed Saul from being king over Israel and replaced him with David. The Most High fires and hires. He removes and uplifts. So when we see some of our teachers, elders, people whom we respect, brothers and sisters, give them homage, but do know and understand that we got to still carry that baton. All right? So let us look at what we're going to talk about. The 12 tribe chart, as shown, we want to look at this for edification purposes and no slander in this particular matter. And what do we see when we look at it? Judah, so-called Negroes. Benjamin, West Indians. Levi, Haitians. Now, no disrespect. This chart was presented and given to people as a form of understanding. So that way people can know what it is. But here is, and no disrespect as stated, intended. Sorry if I showed the wrong part of it. Israel's physicality, like it says, your faces will not grow pale, did not change. The book of Micah, chapter 6, says that Israel shall be like a lamb or a lion, pardon me, among the nations. So yeah, Israel scattered to West Africa, the people, but not every West African is an Israelite. Just because Israel migrated there, running from the Greeks and the Romans, that to Western Africa does not mean that every single human being in Western Africa is an Israelite. So now, if you had Israelites among the said indigenous people of this land, that doesn't make each and every single human being that's the said descendant of that an Israelite. Because we, using our record, show a citation and source of what we're talking about. Let's go, if we will, as we all know, Deuteronomy, the 28th chapter. All right, we're very familiar with Deuteronomy 28, but let's get into this and see what we can gather for reasonable purposes. Verse 64, and the Lord shall scatter thee among all people, from the one end of the earth even unto the other, and there thou shalt serve other gods, which neither thou nor your fathers have known, even wood and stone. So it speaks about Israel, the people, being brought into captivity, scattering by the hand of the Most High. Let us keep our hand here in Deuteronomy 28, and let us go to Jeremiah. We're going to go and let the book speak, of course, not my teacher, this camp, the other camp over there. Jeremiah chapter 30, verse 10, and it says the following. Therefore fear thou not, O my servant Jacob, saith Yah, neither be dismayed, O Israel, for lo, I will save thee from afar, and thy seed from the land of their captivity. What does it say? And thy seed from the land of their captivity. Jeremiah chapter 30, verse 10. There's no such thing as I am spiritual Israel. No, that's the crafty converse. Psalm 83 talks about to cut Israel off as a nation, that what? The name of Israel may not be in remembrance. As it says in Deuteronomy 32, I will make their memory cease from among men. So in Jeremiah 30, verse 10, it says, and thy seed, which is a physical matter, from the land of their captivity. And Jacob shall return and shall be in rest. And Jacob shall return and shall be in rest and be quiet, and none shall make him afraid. This was not going to be by the Balfour Declaration in the 1917, 1918 era with the European Jewish people. You don't sign no treaties and make covenant with the nations. Deuteronomy 7 tells you, do not make a covenant and a contract with the nations. So the Balfour Declaration the Jewish man did shows you not the people Jeremiah talked about, because you're not in comfort and you're not in ease in that land. So there's a couple of things to point out in Jeremiah, who was a Levite of the house of Aaron. Their seed from the land of their captivity. So that shows you no spiritual Israel. The issue is Ezekiel tells us that Israel's supposed to get a new spirit. The physical Israel needs a new spirit. Not you get rid of Israel physically, and then people talking about their physical Israel. That wasn't the way. Then it says, and shall return in rest and quiet, not bombs bursting in the air, not making contracts with the Ishmaelites, the Arabs, the Nabatean people that's over there that Ezekiel 35 talks about. Because you got Ishmael and Edom that's conspired together with Rome to get Israel out, but we'll get into that in a second. So there would never be no contract with the League of Nations or the United Nations for Israel to get back into the land. This is already sealed by the word of the Most High. It said judgment was set and the books were opened in Daniel chapter 7. So though these kingdoms join hand to hand, they shall not flourish. They shall be destroyed, saith Yah. And Israel shall return. The true house of Israel. After, as some people call the wheat and the tares, as some people in Ezekiel says, the rebels among you shall be purged in the wilderness. So it says that the Most High will bring them through in Zechariah, and 2/3 shall be cut off even of the house of Israel. So out of that which shall remain, the remnant, that is what will be brought back. And that remnant did not go there under the Balfour Declaration in the 1917, 1918 era. It is not under Schindler's List in the situation after World War II. The Jewish man, did you know they was going to talk about bringing him over to Guyana because they needed a land for the Jewish people because he was being kicked up out of Europe? They thought of Liberia and Guyana. But they just decided to settle in the land of Israel. Which take you back to Japheth inside the tent of Shem, which is another subject, getting back to Genesis 9 under the prophecy from Noah. But brothers and sisters, getting back into what we're talking about here, if we will. Jeremiah 31, verse 10, to get back to the point. Hear the word of the Most High, O you nations, and declare it in the isles afar off, and say, He, read on, He that scattered Israel. See, I'm used to somebody reading with me, so I'm saying read on. But here we go. He, meaning the Most High, that scattered Israel will gather him and keep him as a shepherd does his flock. What does it say? He that scattered Israel will gather. So no camp, no teacher can do it. So your chart is not in line. The chart that the Falashas in Ethiopia got, the chart that the Bantu people got in the Congo, or the chart that came, no disrespect, from one West is accurate. None of them. Whether the chart that the Beta Israel, the said Falashas in Ethiopia, that chart is off. The chart that the Bantu people got in Congo, that chart is off. And the chart that came out of one West, that chart is off too. Because it says that he that scattered Israel will gather. And the Most High did not tell you to make a chart. Israel's portion was to return, accept our punishment, and return to the Most High. Sometimes brothers or sisters from the camps, and I was with a camp, so my mother brought me to a camp as a baby, so I'm not here to bash a camp. What I'm saying, or portraying, if we will, or presenting, if we will, brothers and sisters, is the reason why you see so many different ideologies with the chart is because the Most High has not gathered the scattered yet. So until his hand comes down, just like in the wilderness, Reuben, we're the priests. Simeon, we're the priests. Judah, we're the priests. Dan, we're the priests. Listen, this is what we're going to do. Every man bring his censer, and we're going to let the Most High decide, when you lay your rods down, who is his priest. And the Aaron's rod of the tribe of Levi is whom the Most High chose to be the priest within the house of Israel. So while everybody is doing their chart matter, if it's not in line by saying, thus saith the Lord, then your chart is off. I state again, if your chart is not according to a word or by a known prophet of the Most High, like Jeremiah was a known prophet, then your chart is off. My Beta Israel so-called Falasha brother, your chart is off too. My Bantu brother is saying that Judah is there and the African American is the other tribes. That chart is off too. And the chart that says that the Negro is Judah, and you're not talking about El Negro in the land of Boricua, aka Puerto Rico, the black man in Puerto Rico, the Basel Negroes in the Dominican Republic, the Africano Negritos that live in South America. Your chart is not talking about that because you said the Negro is the tribe of Judah. So you already covered the Negro or the Negro or the black with that. So in your mind, everybody else looks like Leave It to Beaver. That means everybody else looks like Leave It to Beaver on your chart because the Negro, which means black and Spanish and Portuguese, is who you're talking about in North America. Brothers and sisters, 30% of the slave ships went to Brazil. Did you know that? 6% came to the United States. So you have over 40% that went to the Caribbean and Latin America. 30 out of 100 slave ships alone from the era of 1441 until the era of 1859 went to Brazil. No, I stand corrected. 1888 was the last slave ship that went to Brazil. So let's understand this. The ideology in the teaching of the chart that has been promoted is that the southern kingdom, that's why we talked about Solomon and Rehoboam and the splitting of the kingdom and the kingdoms of Assyria and Babylon in this presentation in the beginning intro, because it leads to what we're talking about now. The southern kingdom, brothers and sisters, is said to be the tribes of Levi, said by some as Levi. Okay, we're not going to argue over Levi and Levi. We're adults. Levi, Benjamin, and Judah. And that they were taken to Babylon and came back under the Ezra era and the Nehemiah era. But let's see what Ezra says. We're going to let the book speak. Ezra chapter 3, verse 1. After Babylon fell to Cyrus of Persia, let's see what Ezra says about who was inside of the land. Ezra chapter 3, verse 1. And when the 7th month was come, and the children of Israel were in the cities, the people gathered themselves together as one man to Jerusalem. Ezra is saying this is after Babylon fell. This is the era of Cyrus and later on Darius. The same Darius that you read of in Daniel chapter 9. What does it say in Ezra chapter 3? That the children of Israel were in their cities. So we cannot, after Babylon fell, talk about northern and southern kingdom because it's not a kingdom no more. No disrespect. There's not a kingdom because there was no king. How do we know this? Biblical timeline and letting the book speak. Let's go to Isaiah chapter 1. Let's notice a pattern in the scriptures, right? If we will. Isaiah chapter 1, verse 1. Letting the book speak for itself. Okay? And what does it say? I got to get to it myself. Isaiah 1, verse 1. The vision of Isaiah, the son of Amos, which he saw concerning Judah and Jerusalem in the days of Uzziah, Jotham, Ahaz, and Hezekiah, kings of Judah. There's a timeline Isaiah speaking. Uzziah was the 10th descendant of King David. Jotham, Ahaz, and Hezekiah. Now, let's go to Jeremiah chapter 1, verse 1. and let's see what it says. Letting the book speak for itself. The words of Jeremiah, the son of Hilkiah, of the priests that were in Anatot, in the land of Benjamin, to whom the word of the Most High came in the days of Josiah, the son of Ammon, king of Judah, in the 13th year of his reign. It came also in the days of Jehoiakim, the son of Josiah, king of Judah, unto the 11th year of Zedekiah, the son of Josiah, king of Judah, unto the carrying away of Jerusalem captive in the 5th month. Jeremiah was a Levite in the land of Benjamin. Jeremiah is 60 years after Isaiah. What happened between Hezekiah during the era of Isaiah? Isaiah died. The king after Hezekiah is King Manasseh of Judah. He reigned from age 12 to age 67. Now, what did Manasseh do? Murder, witchcraft. Chronicles said he did obia. You know what obia is? Witchcraft, vandu, macombre. You know, that stuff that Moses told us in Deuteronomy not to do. So, ob is the word in Hebrew. Is that where they get the West Indian term or African term or so, obia from? Manasseh, king of Judah, did that. The Most High had him removed as king when you go to Jeremiah 15. So let's get back to the point of this, to point something out. Let's go to Ezekiel, if we will, chapter 1, verse 1. Now it came to pass in the 30th year, in the 4th month, in the 5th day of the month, as I, Ezekiel, as I was among the captives by the river Chebar, that the heavens were opened and I saw visions of the Most High. In the 5th day of the month, which was the 5th year of King Jehoiachin's captivity. Jehoiachin is the grandson of Josiah. You had Josiah, Jehoiakim, and Jehoiachin. Jehoiachin is called, brothers and sisters, Qanath in Jeremiah chapter 22. You notice they were still having kings up during that particular era and during, brothers and sisters, that particular time. And did you know, if we will, brothers and sisters, for edification purposes, that those kings are mentioned in a record of other nations? So with these kings, brothers and sisters, being mentioned in a record of other nations, how can anything of that nature ever be denied? I want to point this out here, if we will. Israelites show no records outside of the Bible. This is a record from the Babylonians, today known as the matter of Jehoiachin, a captive in Babylon. What I just showed. Israelites always talk about that Bible. See what happened to your man recently, right? That shot the Bible. We ain't gonna make it about that dude all the time on the channel. See what happened to him? Just like Jehoiachin got caught in his wickedness, so did he. The Most High does not change. So, brothers and sisters, remember the guy that shot the Bible and said Israelites don't show nothing? What I just showed was inside, or is inside, the Berlin Museum. Israelites never talk about museums. They always talk about their Bible. Well, we just went outside of the Bible to show something of what we're talking about. Somebody thought Israelites didn't study. Let's move on. What do we want to point out? Isaiah was during an era when there were kingdoms of Israel. Jeremiah, when there was kingdoms of Israel. Ezekiel was taken a captive during the era when Zedekiah was still ruling in Jerusalem. That's why Ezekiel chapter 6, 7, and 8 recounts what happened when Jerusalem fell during the era of King Zedekiah. Zedekiah is the uncle to Jehoiachin of Judah. Now, with all of that said, you see how the timeline of those prophets speak about a particular era? Now let's go, if we will, to Zechariah chapter 1. Zechariah chapter 1 says this, letting the book speak, not, brothers and sisters, my book, but the book. We ain't playing salesman on the Shabbat. This is the word we giving you, free. The book of Zechariah, chapter 1, verse 1. In the 8th month, in the 2nd year of Darius, came the word of the Lord unto Zechariah, the son of Berechiah, the son of Edo, the prophet, saying, whoa, where the kings of Judah at? And Zechariah, they not there, baby. That's what we want to talk about. By the time that we read in Zechariah chapter 1, the king that it mentions is Darius. He's with the Persians and the Medes. He ain't Israel. So there was no Israelite kingdom by the time Ezra came along the scene. That's why in the era of Ezra and Nehemiah, you find in Nehemiah, the 2nd chapter, Nehemiah going and getting permission from Ahasuerus to go back home to Jerusalem. During the era of Cyrus, Darius, Ahasuerus, they were the people that were the satraps and the governors during the era of Daniel, Zechariah, Haggai, and Malachi. That's why those prophets don't talk about a list of kings like Isaiah 1 does, Jeremiah 1 does. What does that prove? You can't then, after Babylon fell to the Medes and the Persians, you can't talk about a northern and southern kingdom because Israel had no kingdom. That's why the timeline about that is important. So if you're going to teach and say that the southern kingdom was Judah, Benjamin, and Levi, or Judah, Benjamin, and Levi, right? And that the 10 tribes of the northern kingdom was in Assyria and in the book of the Apocrypha, went to the land of Aseret, which many state is North America, and then became the indigenous Indians. That is a teaching that is circulating. When you go into the book of Ezra, chapter 13, verse 40 to verse 48, in the Apocrypha. Before we speak about Aseret, if we will, the Mount of the Remnants, one of the things that we want to talk about, brothers and sisters, we want to point this out for reasonable purposes. Let's go to the scriptures. Zechariah chapter 7. And I thank the brother elder Qanath for the time. Now, I spoke off camera to the elder. I said, if I go over my time, let me know. I have been known in camps that I was a camp and member of to been pulled down. I've been pulled down like, yo, you're doing too much or you're doing the most right now. It's time to step down. So let me know what it is with the time frame. Thank you. We are in Zechariah chapter 7, verse 8. Now remember, during the era of Zechariah, Israel and Judah had no king. Thus you had no kingdom. All right? But you had your prophets. It says this. And the word of the Lord came unto Zechariah, saying, thus speaketh the Lord of hosts, saying, execute true judgment and show mercy, and compassions every man to his brother, and oppress not the widow, nor the fatherless, the stranger, nor the poor, and let none of you imagine evil against his brother in your heart. Say what now? What does it say? No disrespect. It's not saying bring your lamb of the first year without blemish in this case. This says, and let none of you imagine evil against his brother in your heart. Character. self-evaluation. Take heed to thine own self. Look out for the widow, the fatherless, and the stranger. So when you got black girls talking about they molested and her father may not be around, somebody got to go and whoop somebody's ASS. I got a daughter. And like they said on the stream before, that'll be a time my brother will catch a case. It tells us that we are supposed to not oppress the widow nor the fatherless. Do you know, as this camp, the brother Shah Shem, I remember the brother pointed out the word for rape in Hebrew is anas. Aleph Nun Samet. Anas means rape. Not tapas, which means to take. But not dealing linguistically fully. But we want to point something out, if we will, right? The community has to then step in at certain cases. This is why we as Israel, we must repent for dropping the ball in our own community. Israelites have been known to meet up on Shabbat, whether you say Shabbat Shalom, Shabbat Shalom, is as if the Shalom, the Shalom, the Shalom, whatever Hebrew you think is saying is right, seems to fail once Shabbat is over. And everybody say Shabbat, whatever school you come from. So we agree on that. But we can't have a Shabbat spirit when the daughters of Israel, Judah, Levi, Dan, Manasseh, and Gad are saying they're being molested. The Most High will hold us accountable. The book of Haggai, which was after the kingdoms of Israel and Judah, it says, woe to those who build a house and pay not the man his wages. So the church system talking about, wait for it from the sky. The Lord didn't send no angels down on earth to help you, brother. He sent human beings. So you don't play and disrespect your brothers and sisters and get it, your blessing on earth and then tell them to wait for the sky. That's an unbalanced wait. You didn't wait for the sky. You accepted what the Most High gave you on earth. But you trade in an evil for a good. So if you don't understand the history of Israel, or if you understand the history of Israel and not understand why Israel fell, we got to sit there and change that particular matter. It tells you in Deuteronomy, you are supposed to, as Israel, harbor runaway slaves. That's how you know the Bible ain't their book, because in North Carolina, it was a crime to keep in a runaway slave. Strout slave laws, look it up on Amazon, that book. It was against the law in North Carolina to harbor a runaway slave. It was against the law of the Code of Hammurabi of Babylon to harbor a runaway slave. So we can see why it's called Babylon. Israelite law in Deuteronomy 23, we're supposed to harbor runaway slaves. So if somebody is running to the house of Israel for security, be it a son or a daughter, Israelites are never supposed to be known for taking a minor to a hotel and giving something to drink. As a child, the camp that I came out of, the only time the children was given alcoholic beverages was wine, and it was in the company of their mother, father, grandmother, uncle, and the moray, or the teacher, or the elder, or the general, and that was only on New Moon, and sometimes on Passover. Israel is not to be known for giving alcoholic beverages when the parents are not around. And the wine that they gave us as a child, when I was a child in the camp, was not to get us intoxicated. So as we see here, not getting sidetracked, brothers and sisters, we are supposed to, according to our book, it says, oppress not the widow. Don't sit there and know that the sister is coming for spiritual and biblical enlightenment and you trying to get up in between them legs. She ain't come for that. Sisters have been turned off from Israel because As soon as Shalom, yes, sister, what's up with them digits? That's not what you came there for, Ak. And not getting sidetracked from Shabbat. If a sister like a brother, Ak, she'll let you know. She'll let you know, Ak. You ain't got to be like Eli's sons in the book of Samuel, where the woman came to the camp or the temple, and then you trying to, pardon the terminology, hit that. That's not what you're supposed to be doing. So you don't take offense. You know, she ain't got no man. I'm going to just sit. The Most High sees all of that. Let's go on. It says, and oppress not the widow, nor the fatherless, the stranger, nor the poor. And let none of you imagine evil against his brother in your heart. That is Israel's problem. Imagining evil in your heart. Because you don't say what it is, but you harbor it in. And instead of doing the laws of the Torah, Leviticus says, you shall surely rebuke your neighbor. But you don't rebuke your neighbor. Israelites hold it in and move funny style. Israelites hold it in and move weird one with another. No respect for one another. No honor for one another. And it's all because you're not man enough to sit there and say, brother, I got a controversy I want to talk with you about. And you can discuss it as men. You rather sit there and be the type of man that Solomon described in Proverbs 6, that points with his fingers and scrapes with his feet. The wicked man. He points with his fingers. He talks with his hands. Yeah, you see that there? Yeah. You got three back at yourself. And he scrapes with his feet, Proverbs 6, because he doesn't step up. So he moves like, say, an elder with slippers. He scrapes his feet. He doesn't know how to step it up and speak from his heart and his mind. He doesn't use his mouthpiece. He uses his hands and his feet. That's not what the Most High gave you to speak with. He gives you a mind and a heart to address your brothers and sisters. Character, self-evaluation, if we will. If you're going to talk about that history, you got to talk about this. And this is how you know, right? This is how you know Schlossberg, Weinstein, Gorbachev, and for those in New York, the people that's over by Kingston and Crown Heights or Williamsburg and Brooklyn. Those guys, you know, the ones that you see in Jerusalem today trying to act like they the house of Judah. They don't claim this history. Well, why did you fall as a people? They don't say it's because of the woman that got raped to the point when she died in the book of Judges. They don't talk about the Danites that kidnapped the Levite and said, you're going to be our priest. Kidnapping in Israel is a death penalty. They don't talk about the Danite mother whose son stole from her, and then when he gave her the money, she used the money to buy an idol. That's the part they don't talk about. Weinstein doesn't talk about that. Schlossberg doesn't talk about that. You understand? They don't talk about why the Bible in Jeremiah chapter 5 says, for among my people are found wicked men. Behold, they set a trap, they catch men. For as a thief is ashamed, so is the house of Israel. They, their priests, their prophets, and their kings, said the prophet Jeremiah. Schlossberg isn't going to tell you that history. They're not going to tell you about the fact of the faggots that came of the house of Judah, that Josiah, and before him, Jehoshaphat, and before him, Asa, had to put away enslaved. 2 Kings 23 talks about the download the download sodomite on YouTube. We're going to keep it what it is. They're not going to sit there and talk about the download sodomites that was on inside the temple in Jerusalem. they're not going to claim that history. They're not going to talk about what happened with those particular aspects. How does the city sit solitary? A city that was full of righteousness, but now murderers lodge in it. See, they know your history, O house of Israel. And as they claim your identity, Schlossberg and Weinstein says, we have always kept the laws of Hashem. That's what, those people who try to be us say. Not understanding Leviticus 19:27, going with the curls on the side of a thing like that. We've always kept the commandments. The Hashem of Abraham. No, you didn't. And if you kept the laws, like you was talking about in Schindler's List, and as we who are Tanakh based go and talk to them in Hebrew, and they say things like, oh, we got more books than y'all, and we've been studying longer. Of course you study longer. When you steal someone's identity, you got to study it in order to try to practice it. So of course you got more books in your Judaica store than we have. You stole it. Of course you got more. It says of Edom in book of Obadiah, it says, if thieves come to thee, will they not leave some gleaning grapes? Nah, they're not. That's why they're a thief. So you took our records. That's what it says of Edom in the book of Obadiah. You should have not touched the substance of Jacob. Neither should have thou cutteth those that escaped. So when they cannot claim the wickedness of the ancient house of Israel, the sodomites, the kidnappers, the murderers in Judges chapter 12, the fact of Jeroboam and Rehoboam's house having constant war. Do you say Sheboleth or Seboleth? And the men of Ephraim was being attacked by other Israelites because they couldn't say she, that's why they said thee. In Judges chapter 12. You don't claim that history. You don't claim the history of the Levites that was sleeping with the women inside of the temple. You don't claim the history of the tribe of Judah that was beating their wives down. That the book of Malachi talks about. The princes have dealt treacherously with the wife of their youth. What does treacherous mean? Not understanding their wife, not respecting her, not doing what Proverbs 31 says. They don't claim that sad history of the Israelites. So therefore, you can't be the Israelites now. If you're not willing to claim the sad portion of Israel, you can't claim Israel's beautiful future. So the brothers that speak about we got next, Schlossberg can't claim we got next, speaking of themselves, because you don't want to claim the past. So how you going to claim next? Your own arrogance have cut you off from the lineage of Israel, Schlossberg and Weinstein. So that's what we want to point out about that. Because this book is riddled with the wickedness of the Israelites. So you got to use your Talmud, your Mishnah, your Zohar, your Shulchan Aruch. You got to go there. Because you're not going to not Torah, Nevi'im, and Ketuvim, the law, the prophets, and the writers. You're not doing that. You got to go secular. Because you're not the people that came up out of the land of Egypt. So you don't understand Deuteronomy 28. Because you wasn't in Egypt as a captive in the first place in your history. So going back to Egypt in ships, and you was already in Germany, Poland, and in Holland. So you wasn't brought into captivity. Your captive came to where you was already there in enslaved Judea, or castrated Judea, or did a Holocaust over in there. You wasn't brought from one land to another. So the prophecies don't fit you. The history doesn't fit you. And you being in our land, the land of Israel, guess what? The climate does not fit you either. because the heat from there gives you cancer, because you don't have the melatonin in your skin for that, as the people of Judah, Dan, Gad, and Manasseh would have. So we read about the plagues from the Lord of hosts. Heat is one of his hosts. You have no business in here. You've taken on the heritage of a culture of the house of Israel, while the true house of Israel has been left in dogmas and in religions, in games, and chasing a proverbial carrot. So when we come to this truth, it astonishes you, because you intended us to never wake up. Now, enough time on that part. Getting back to what we're talking about, if we will. Right? By the time the Persian Empire came, Israelites, to a certain and a great extent, were already inside, brothers and sisters, of their migration. Let's go to Jeremiah, letting the book speak again. Jeremiah chapter 44, if we will. Thank you for that. Jeremiah chapter 44 reads on this wise. And it says this: the word that came to Jeremiah concerning all the Jews, meaning they of the people of Judah, which dwell in the land of Egypt, which dwell in the land of Egypt, which dwell in the land that Psalm says is the land of Ham. Egypt, not England. During the Old Testament era, Israelites was in Egypt. In the book of the Apocrypha, first Sodomy, second Maccabees, it says to all that be in Judea in Egypt. Let's go to Isaiah chapter 30, because we're going to build and let the book speak for itself about the diaspora of the house of Israel. Let's go to Isaiah. Keep your hand in Jeremiah 44. And let us go, brothers and sisters, to Isaiah chapter 30 and see what it says. And it reads on this wise: woe to the rebellious children, saith the Most High, that take counsel, but not of me, and that cover with a covering, but not by my spirits, that they may add sin to sin, that walk to go down into Egypt, and have not asked in my mouth, to strengthen themselves in the strength of Pharaoh, and to trust in the shadow of Egypt. Hold on. Isaiah and Jeremiah are like 60 years apart. So they was going down into Egypt since the era of Isaiah, and even before that. But by the time we get to Jeremiah 44, it says, 44 verse 1, which dwell at Migdal and at Tapanhes and Noth and in the country of Patros, saying, hold on. Migdal is mentioned as one of the places in Exodus where Israel went through. Tapanhes was later on called Daphne by the Greeks. But do you know what Tapanhes means from the Egyptian? Pankes means black. Ta in Egyptian means land, L-A-N-D, like Ta Seti, Ta Mary. But Tapanhes, brothers and sisters, means the land of the Negro. If the Greeks were the whites to be first into Egypt, and Israelites was already in Egypt 300-400 years before the Greek Alexander, what did these people look like? Let us go on for what we're talking about. In that Noth and in the country of Patros, saying, what do we want to point out? Israel was already being scattered was in those particular places. So if we can, brothers and sisters, right? Let us go. Thank you for that. Thank you. What we want to do is show something for reference and for edification purposes, if we will, brothers and sisters. All right? Look at this here. Do you know what this is? That's the Edification Papyrus. Edification and Papyrus is the same vicinity by the first cataract of the Nile River. As you go further in southern Egypt, going toward the modern day place called the Sudan. So the scriptures talks about where Israel was scattered. So now by the time we get 2 decades after Jeremiah, and we get to the time of Ezra, during the era of the Medes and the Persians. Have you ever heard of the Murashu? And I'm going to type this into the room. Murashu. The Murashu were the Israelites that was inside, brothers and sisters, of Persia that were working as goldsmiths. So Israel is already being shown scattered within the modern wrong term called the Middle East. We know the Middle East is a false term. But what they call the Middle East is where Israel began to have been scattered. When we, the said West Indian, when we, the said African American, are saying that we are descendants of the ancient Israelites, we are talking about the ones, brothers and sisters, that went and migrated, brothers and sisters, according to as you see here, into Western Africa. As stated, this doesn't make every person in West Africa an Israelite. But one of the things, brothers and sisters, regarding that is, did you know that there are people in Western Africa that speak about being the Israelites and speak about us being the descendants of the Israelites? Let us read something for edification purposes, if we will. All right? And show what we're talking about. Here's a picture. Sorry about that. I want to show them much better. Of Rome to Jerusalem. So now, if you have an enemy coming to you from the north, would it not, in logic, make more sense to run south? So when, by default, did the Israelites in great multitudes on their own volition run and become Europeans, and then having the 10 tribes or any tribe looking like Leave It to Beaver? See, this is something, as stated, no disrespect intended to anybody. But we want to, brothers and sisters, emphasize what happened with the history, signing the book with us as a people, and then close this particular presentation out. Now that we have discussed the tribal chart, we want to go from there to talk about how the people also who try to impersonate us are not us. We talked about that. The next thing we want to talk about, brothers and sisters, is the sad part with our history and how we're showing who we are. We're going to read a couple of verses out of Deuteronomy, the 28th chapter, a chapter that they who try to claim to be us do not go into. This is something that the basketball player, forgot the brother's name, who knows himself as an Israelite, pointed out as well. Deuteronomy, the 28th chapter, does not have a specific date. So we have to go upon, as it says here, let it speak for itself. Deuteronomy 28, verse 45. Moreover, all these curses shall come upon thee, and shall pursue thee, and overtake thee, till thou be destroyed. Because thou hearkenest not unto the voice of the Most High your power, to keep his commandments and his statutes which he commanded thee. And they shall be upon thee for a sign, and for a wonder, and upon thy seed forever. Forever meaning an undetermined time. Because thou servest not the Lord thy God with joyfulness and with gladness of heart, for the abundance of all things. Meaning when Israel, Jeshurun, waxed fat and kicked, or Yashurun, waxed fat and kicked, it says in Deuteronomy. For the abundance of all things, like, okay, we didn't need the Most High no more in that case. Therefore shalt thou serve thine enemies, whom the Lord shall send against thee, in hunger, and in thirst, and in nakedness, and in want of all things. And he shall put a yoke of iron upon thy neck until he hath destroyed thee. So let's go to Deuteronomy. Seeing that these curses shall be upon the seed of the house of Israel, for a sign and for a wonder. Let's do by the process of elimination who we're talking about. Let's go, if we will, to verse 32. Thy sons and thy daughters shall be given unto another people, and thine eyes shall look and feel with longing for them all the day long, and there shall be no might in thy hand. Verse 37. And that shall become an astonishment, a proverb, and a byword among all the nations, whither the Most High shall lead thee. Verse 41. Thou shalt beget sons and daughters, but thou shalt not enjoy them, for they shall go into captivity. Verse 43. The stranger that is within thee shall get above thee very high, and thou shalt come down very low. He shall lend to thee, and thou shalt not lend to him. He shall be the head, and thou shalt be the tail. Who is the head and the tail? Who? As it says, he, the stranger, shall lend to you, and you shall not lend to him. Do you know who operates the student loan business? Jewish people. Disqualified from being the people of Israel because you don't fit them curses. So let's see who does fit. Ask a said black man or woman for $50. See what happens. See, and go in your inbox and ask brother or sister, yo, can you cash at me a 20 or 50? See if you don't get blocked online. Let a brother or a sister, or a brother and a sister, ask a sister. I kind of really, need something, for a job interview. You need to get a job already. Block. We ain't in a position too low to be the lenders and not the borrowers. Ask somebody to stay over at their house for a month, and then I'll pay you when I get back on my feet. You will be sent the inbox that says, don't let nobody in your house, no matter how sad their story is. That's what we do. So when it says, he shall lend to you, you should not lend to him. We got reasons as people as to why we ain't giving an end anything. And you know what I mean by the N word. Ain't no N going to be asking me for any S word. We're going to keep the language clean. I got to go to work and I got my own bills. See how we think? Because we don't have it in our power to do it like that for us as a people. But who is the one who runs Citibank when you get a loan? Chase Bank when you get a loan? TD Bank when you get a loan? Who's the one who signs off on that? The bank president. And the less than 50 black banks that's in America stands out like the ones in Greensboro, North Carolina, because the heavy hitters is not sadly by us, because the said African American only contributes less than 2 or 3% to the economy of the United States without it going outside of their own community. Did you know that? Did you know that our dollar goes right outside, and in the Jewish community, it goes 7 to 14 times before it goes out? Disqualified, that's not you. Deuteronomy chapter 28, verse 20. We are going to do by the process of elimination using not my book, but the book, Who is Who. And it says this, Deuteronomy 28, verse 20. The Lord shall send upon thee cursing, vexation, and rebuke, and all that thou settest thy hand unto for to do, until thou be destroyed, and until thou perish quickly, because of the wickedness of your doings, whereby thou hast forsaken me. We've always kept the laws of Hashem. If this Hashem that you're talking about is the God that Jeremiah spoke of, then you ain't the people that Moses was talking to. Because, excuse me, some wicked niggas of ancient Israel were rapists, liars, thieves, connivers, rapists, liars, idolaters, connivers, thieves. This, matter of fact, we won't let the book speak to sit there and get the list of tribes to see what it is. See, this is, we're going to let the book speak because we want to point out that who it is and who it's not. Because any Israelite camp, Tanakh base or Messianic camp, all of us have an understanding when an Israelite says, wow, we, black people, West Indian, African American, are in the situation that we're in, we're going to let the book speak. And it happens to be in the Old Testament, in Jeremiah chapter 16. But we're going to go to Ezekiel 22 and see what it says. Ezekiel, the 22nd chapter, so we can see what crimes ancient Israel was guilty of, listed in their own book, that these other nations who want to beat us don't claim in their history. If you can't claim the sad part, then you can't claim, like the other brothers from the house of Israel say, we got next. You can't say that you're the people saying Edom is the end of the world that is, and Jacob is in the world that follow, in Ezra 6 verse 9, because you don't claim to be the ancient Israelites according to the seed line. Ezekiel chapter 22, and we're going to go, brothers and sisters, into verse 6, so we can let the book speak. Ezekiel 22 verse 6. Let's see who can claim this and who would have the heart to say, we need to hold our head down in shame for such. Behold, the princes of Israel, everyone in their power, were in their power to shed blood. Now Ezekiel was talking to the land, and let's see what happens. In thee, meaning in the land, they have shed light, they have set light by father and mother, dishonoring your parents. In the midst of thee, they have dealt by oppression with the stranger. In thee have they vexed the fatherless and the widow. Didn't we just read about that in Zechariah about the fatherless and the widow? Thou hast despised my holy things, and I profane my Sabbaths. And thee are men that carry tails to shed blood. Yo, son, I heard you. Yo, set it on that nigga. And thee, they eat upon the mountains. What's wrong with the pork? Grandma had it. In the midst of thee, they commit lewdness. Yo, we're going to run that train on that chick. We're going to let the butt speak because this is raw, baby. Israel, not Islam. So we can gain an understanding of what we're talking about. It says a father and his son go to the same woman to profane the name of Yah. That's in ancient Israel. Well, Weinstein and Schlossberg claim that in their history, you had a father go into a woman, and then after him, his son went into the same woman sexually. Amos said it happened. Ezekiel talks about it. Why don't y'all claim that? Because you know Amos and Ezekiel ain't talked to the Khazars. That's why. Indeed, they have discovered their father's nakedness. Indeed, have they humbled her that was set apart for pollution. You call it in high school earning your red wings. She's unclean. She's going through that cycle, and you still want to be carnal against the laws of Leviticus 18. Let's go on. And one hath committed abomination with his neighbor's wife, and another hath lewdly defiled his daughter-in-law, and another indeed hath humbled his sister, his father's daughter. And thee have they taken gifts to shed blood. Thou hast taken usury and increase, and have greedily gained of thy neighbors by extortion, and have forgotten me, saith Yah. That's a list of crimes Ezekiel mentions about Israel. If Schlossberg ain't claiming that history, Schlossberg need to be quiet. We want to point that out. Every Israelite camp goes over that. We're going to go and let the book speak in the process of elimination and close out soon enough. My presentation is almost concluded. And I do again thank the congregation, or the, pardon me, camp F.O.P.E for even having a brother on the channel. Let's go, if we will, Jeremiah chapter 16, verse 10, to let it speak for itself. Because we already spoke on the chart historically. We're going to talk scripturally about who's who. Let history and the scriptures show itself. In Jeremiah 16, verse 10, we see the following. And it shall come to pass, when thou shalt show this people all these words, and they shall say unto thee, wherefore hath Yah pronounced all this great evil against us? Or what is our iniquity? Or what is our sin that we have committed against the Most High, our power? This great evil against us. Keep your hand there. And go to Daniel chapter 9, verse 11. Keep your hand in Jeremiah 16. We're going to go line upon line, precept upon precept, if we will. Daniel chapter 9, verse 11 says the following. Yea, or Israel, who Israel have transgressed thy law, even by departing, that they might not obey thy voice. Therefore the curse is poured upon us, and the oath that is written in the law of Moses, the servant of the Most High, because we, Israel, have sinned against him, the Most High. Therefore the curse is poured upon us, and the oath that is written in the law of Moses. Daniel read Jeremiah. So when we read in Jeremiah 16, where it distinctly says, wherefore hath the Lord our God done all this unto us? You shall say unto them, because your Jeremiah 16 again, verse 11, because your fathers have forsaken me, your fathers. Zechariah spoke about the seed of Israel. Deuteronomy 28 says, these curses shall be a sign upon your seed. Don't tell me I got to get a DNA test. Look at the signs of your people. That's a process of elimination, because that DNA test can give people different results. But you sign that you don't get no refund. Oops. So much for the DNA test. Let's see what this says here. Then thou shalt say unto them, because your fathers have forsaken me, says Yah, and have walked after other gods, and have served them, and worshipped them, and have forsaken me, and have not kept my law. Who's claiming that in their religious circles? And ye have done worse than your fathers. For behold, you walk everyone after the imagination of his evil heart, that they may not hearken unto me. Therefore will I cast you out of this land into a land ye know not, neither ye nor your fathers, and there you shall serve other gods day and night, where I will show you no favor. Everybody done got reparations, except African American, Japanese, Chinese, the Alaskan Indian. The list goes on and on who got reparations. What do we get? A matter of, here's your application, and I'm going to get you into a job working at a mall that you can't afford to shop in. But don't worry, you get your taxes in February. Because you're going to take that last check in December and go to H&R Block. Don't ask me how I know. So we can do the process of elimination to find out who cannot lend, who was cast out of their land. Why is the black man in the Western Hemisphere landless, languageless, while the land of Israel sits in destitute, while the black man is destitute without land in the West? It says that I will cast you out of this land into a land that you know not, and you shall serve other gods. We bow down in their churches, in their mosques. We've gone from mountain to hill, and Jacob has forgotten their resting place. We've believed and enveloped ourselves into every doctrine, from atheism to Buddhism. And none of them are telling you where is your land, what is your culture, and what is your language. Every people on earth have a land, language, and a culture, except us. We're speaking English. In Haiti, we speak French. In Panama, we speak Spanish. After going over there from Jamaica and Trinidad, Trinidad being a Spanish word for Trinity. We speak in Portuguese in Brazil. And these are all the people who came as descendants, sadly, from the same Atlantic slave trade. So, with the remaining time, we want to go over something and close out in this particular case. If there's any questions, I can be reached. My number, I'll put it inside here if it's possible.
Hey, you know what? Maybe you want to do an email, because a lot of people, man, they will call and harass the hell out of you.
You know what? You're 3,000% right, because I already get certain calls on that. You're right. I'll put my email.
Right. Hey, by the way, great lecture understanding, man. And let me say something about this brother here. It dawned on me. We was in New York one time, and I'm sorry to interrupt, bro. We was in New York, and I forgot what it was, but we was there, and we had to wait for our bus. And
we was on 33rd, 34th Street, Penn Station area.
Yep. And the brother was in the subway station, man, and he sat down there and talked to us, man, kept us company, because we wasn't familiar with New York or anything like that. And I mean, at least over an hour, man. And And it just dawned on me. I said, man, that's a real brother. We really appreciated that, brother. We really did, man. That was a blessing to us, man. It's like, wow, bro, see how they talk to us, because we was like a deer in headlights, you know, stranded, stranded. And the brother said that we had to wait to the buses started running again. We was stranded in New York, and he sat right there and kept us company, man. And I appreciate that.
That was back in like 2013, 2014. Yeah, maybe 2015 at this point. I'm thinking, I don't know.
Yeah, it was
I remember that, Elder.
Yeah,
I remember that.
I remember that, man.
But it just go to show, if I'm not over talking you, my bad.
Go ahead.
That just go to show how the Most High bring people together. You understand?
Yep.
So I was standing there, and then I just happened to keep on walking, and I'm looking, and I see the head ties and the garments. I'm like, that's Israel. And I want to say something, man. I want to say something to the men, to the males, to the grown boys. And this is no disrespect, and I want to call any black man a boy. But listen, man, it's very fruity of you, all right, to take shots at another man's clothes. When I used to see One West before all the splits that happened in the year 2000, and I saw them on 42nd and 8th, I used to see them, like I stated earlier, 44th and Broadway or 45th and Broadway. They used to call that area there in Manhattan the Alley. Fulton, downtown Brooklyn, and all of that, right? When they used to sit there and I hate to have to say it, but it's the truth. When they used to make the people shook, who are the Nawabians, when they used to go out there from One West in their all red attire, with their mitris on the Coliseum block in Queens, and teaching hard body. When they used to sit there and make the Khazarian Jewish people with their Hebrew, ancient Hebrew on their belt, whether you say Yasha Allah or Yisrael, I remember them looking like, and he's teaching his son a lie, that they're the Jews when they're not. What is the difference between busting your behind in overtime to say that some European man, Santa, gave your child the gift and you lying to your child, or they lying to the children about being a tribe of Judah? When the child finds out the parent lied, that child don't respect you in the same light. And no disrespect, I know this because, may she rest in peace, my mother, my first Israelite teacher, my mother, said when she found out in the 50s that Santa was alive, she said she looked at her mother different, yo. And she never dishonored my grandmother. So that's why when you find like Jewish people in the land of Israel smoking cigarettes on Shabbat, doing parties on Friday night, it's because they know, like, yo, the nation shall come and say, we've inherited nothing but lies, says in Jeremiah. So they know this ain't them. They can't grasp onto this hard body because their spirit ain't gonna feel it. You feel me? So just want to point that out in that particular case. You know what I mean? But again, my email for those who are interested, I'm putting it inside of the chat. Thank you, YYISRAEL22@yahoo.com. But I want to read something and close it out, and then close out. Thank you again, my brother, for the time. Deuteronomy 28, verse 52. And he shall besiege thee in all thy gates, until thy high and fortified walls come down, wherein thou didst trust throughout all thy land. And he shall besiege thee in all thy gates, throughout all thy land, which the Lord thy God hath given thee. We were besieged several strong times. Some of the nations were the Canaanites, the Philistines, the Assyrians, the Babylonians, the Greeks, the Romans, the Arabs, the Ethiopians, the Egyptians, the Moabites, the Edomites, and the Americans. The Babylonians razed the city of Jerusalem after laying siege to it for 2 years. Mountains surround Jerusalem, Psalms 125. Gates and walls were used as protection in the cities of Judah and Benjamin. The other cities of Judah were destroyed quicker. The Judites of Judah that were not taken to Babylon went to Egypt. We already read Jeremiah 44 on that. The siege made upon the capital of the northern tribes was for 3 years. The capital was Samaria. Prior to that, some of the tribes were taken into captivity. Gad, Reuben, and Manasseh. 2 Kings chapter 10. By Hazael, king of Israel. Pardon me, by Hazael, king of Syria. The king of Assyria, Tiglath-Pileser, attacked Israel. in 734 BCE. Naphtali was taken captive. After the assaults and attacks on Israel by Tiglath-Pileser, the land of Israel was reduced to Jezreel and Issachar, to the borders of northern Judah. In 725 to 722 BCE, Sennacherib, Shalmaneser V, attacked Israel, which was completed by Sargon, 2 Kings 17. In 701 BCE, Sennacherib of Assyria attacked the famous city of Lachish, as we spoke upon. In this attack, 250,000 of Judah was taken into captivity, and 46 cities of Judah were broken down. Jehu, king of Israel, paid tribute to Shalmaneser III. Jehoash, king of Judah, paid tribute to Hazael, king of Syria. Jehoahaz, king of Israel, paid tribute to Adad-Nirari of Assyria. These kings paid tribute to avoid being besieged, just as we pay rent today to avoid the marshals. Now, what do we want to point out? Israel was already paying tribute to other nations to avoid being besieged. Don't pay your rent 6, 7, 8 months. See what happens. They send a marshal that's besieging you. See what happens? While we are not in a position to really, to a great extent, hold each other down to a great extent like that. Let's go on, if we will, brothers and sisters. The land of Israel had rest after the Israelites were removed from the land, as written in Leviticus 26. In 538 BCE, the Persian king Cyrus II defeated Nabonidus of Babylon, thereby annexing Babylon. The people of Judah, Benjamin, and a lot of Levites were permitted to go back to the land of Israel to rebuild. In 550 BCE, Cyrus II defeated Astyages of the Medes. And as we see in history, the Medes and Persians were one empire by the time Israel came in contact with them. They were more supportive of the Israelites than the Assyrians and Babylonians were. The next people to attack the Israelites were the Greeks. Let's go in, Israel. Alexander, the king of the Greeks, had a successor named Seleucus. And thus we see the Seleucids. Let's go. Break this down. Giving glory to the Most High. Let's go in. Antiochus III captured Jerusalem in 198 BCE. Antiochus IV captured Jerusalem in 168 BCE. And thus we see the Maccabean Revolt. Thus we see the era of Hanukkah coming into play. Jerusalem was besieged again in 131 BCE. The Maccabees fought the Greeks and the Romans tooth and nail. It should be understood that the Levites, Matthias, Jonathan, Simon, were the heads of the Maccabees, but the soldiers and people led were from Benjamin and Judah and the other tribes. It is interesting to note that the Xenon Papyrus, dated to the era of the 3rd century BCE, speaks of the Israelites scattered in Egypt and their complexion. Now let's go and show what we're talking about, brothers and sisters, all right, for edification purposes, if we will. All right, we want to show what we're talking about for edification purposes. This is the Xenon Papyrus. Typing this in, all right? Zenon. You can look this up. Xenon Papyrus. Now, when you translate this, this is how they described how the Israelites looked. You ready? Dark skin, curly hair, black eyes, rather big jaws, uncircumcised, flat nose, protruding lips. Huh? That's how they said Israelites looked during the reign of the Ptolemies in Egypt. Flat nose, curly hair, and protruding lips. That ain't the image of, I ain't got it on me, of Hannibal What are you looking at? Protruding lips and a flat nose and curly hair and dark skin is how the Greeks, who were the Ptolemies, described the Israelites.
That's right. That's right.
What are you talking about with a third of your chart looking like Leave It to Beaver? What about the Afro-Brazilian? What about the Boricua Morenos or Morenos Boricuas, or however you say it, one word before the other? That's in South Puerto Rico. That's treated, excuse me, like shit. Let's go in. What about the blacks in Mexico? That's treated, excuse me, like shit. Your chart ain't covering that when you already said the Negro is the African American in America, as in the United States. So the understanding that you're presenting with the chart is that Judah, Benjamin, and Levi are the black people, and everybody else looks like Ricky Ricardo. No. Leah gave birth to Judah and Issachar. So Leah being one woman, Jacob being one man. Leah didn't have baby daddies. Jacob had different wives. Leah didn't have different husbands in her history. You understand? So if Issachar came from the same, what is that called? Womb. Sorry. If Issachar came out of the same womb that Judah came out of beforehand, and if Zebulun came out of that same thing, the same womb, and why do I mention the womb? Because it mentions in Deuteronomy about the matter of your brother, the son of your mother. Because when you come from the same mommy, you have a maternal link, which many males feel closer to their mommy than their daddy in most cases. Just like mother, son, and father, daughter, that's how they generally say kind of matter, even though, yes, you are what your father is. Which Israelites sadly have tried to manipulate because you don't like Shaniqua. Because you don't like Ayana, Keisha, and Star Keisha. Because you want not Nancy, but you want something that's close to it, so you won't have to sit there and deal with the problems that come when black people are two people under Deuteronomy 28, when it says her eye shall be equal toward her husband. There's a guy who wrote a book. He's an Israelite. His name is Yeshua Barak. And he said black men leave misery. And that black men can go to other Spanish kind of nations, if you will, because the black woman is too difficult to deal with. That's been stated. What you're trying to do, and with sisters who do the aspect of what they call that thing, swirling, if you call it swirling. When we do that as a people, we're trying to run away instead of coming together and building like the Most High told us to do in the book of Zephaniah. Come together, people. Yes, you are what your father is. But you want to know something to be pointed out? The Levites, who are of the priests in Leviticus, is not supposed to marry a woman that's not Israel. Did you know that? Well, what about Joseph? Joseph was the only Israelite known around his area. Weak case, brother who hates Ayana. What about Moses? First, you're not Moses. Second of all, Moses was raised a third of his life inside of the Egyptian palaces. So when you read about the Ethiopian woman or later on the Midianite women, who were, according to Josephus, two different women, but we're not going to go that far, right? His wife was not an Israelite, but you not Moses. And in the laws of Moses, Aaron was not supposed to marry a woman that was not of the 12 tribes. So Aaron having that priesthood, and his wife was from what tribe, if not Judah? Aaron married Elishama of the tribe of Judah. And from that came the line through Zadok, through the priesthood. Leviticus 21 in the laws of Moses tells you that he is not supposed to marry a woman that's not of his people. So if the priest is the standard, and if you know what Tobit 4 verse 12 says, sing it to the choir, I know I am in Tobit 4 verse 12, stop running from your sisters, brothers. Because as deep as it goes, them nations don't want Rashid, don't want Daquan as their son-in-law. When they hold their beautiful pale baby girl in their hands, they are not thinking their grandchild 20, 30 years later and their son-in-law is going to be Rashid or Daquan or Hakeem, or that he's going to come from Capitol Hill, Northeastern DC, or Bed-Stuy, Brooklyn, or Compton, California. He ain't thinking about you as his son-in-law. We read in our records, give your daughter to a man and you have performed a worthy service, but give her to a man of understanding. So if you want to have your children confused when racial matters happen, keep putting your seed inside of the woman that weakens your people. Keep doing it. And have your children looking at you like, mommy, daddy, which side do I belong to? See, a man of understanding ain't going to sell out like that. He's going to know, hold on, I didn't get along. Shakisha was a problem, and I was a problem to Shakisha. I was a problem to Tiana, and Tiana was a problem to me. So let me fix myself up and self-evaluate when the Most High brings the next queen into the life. So your dumb self don't make the same mistakes you made with those in the past. Take heed to yourself, sons of Israel. Don't follow the same pattern that Jeroboam did following Solomon era. Then the argument is not understanding what Tobit is saying. Tobit 4 verse 12. It says they were blessed in their children after that. Well, David had wives that was in Israel and children from them. That's how you know you didn't know Tobit. 4 verse 12. Because David's children was not a blessing. Look at the record. David is running from Absalom. Solomon, in the book of Kings, it says Solomon loved many foreign You are not what your father is. All right, I'm going to explain what that means and why I state you are what your father is in a second, in the comment. All right, I just saw the comment. I'm going to explain what I mean by that. But getting back with Solomon. Solomon, in 1 Kings 11, let's read it. In the Bible, 1 Kings chapter 11. So we can gain some understanding. Now, regarding this, I'm gonna just type it in. Numbers in the Bible 1:18, according to the house of their fathers. Now, we know that when Moses spoke about the earth opening up, Moses referred to the earth in a feminine. If the Lord do a new thing and the earth open her mouth. So if you put seed in the earth, you don't get the earth. You get whatever that seed is. The fruit is known by its seed that it bears. That's one of the statements that's stated. All right. So looking at it, what this particular matter is in this particular case, right? If you put an apple seed inside the earth, Leviticus 19 tells us we're not supposed to cross seed lines in that particular case, right? You are what your father is because the seed line goes according to that. If you put seed in the earth, and we know earth in Numbers chapter 16 is referred to as a she, a her. You put your seed in a woman, you don't get the woman. that the seed was put into, you get, brothers and sisters, whatever that seed was. That's why we point out by saying you are what your father is. Now, if you're a wise father, you're going to go with the daughter of your own people. You're not going to do what some of the ancestors did. That was not the brightest idea. We're going to go in 1 Kings chapter 11, verse 1, and see what happened. But King Solomon loved many strange women, foreign women, together with the daughter of Pharaoh, women of Moab, Ammon, Edom, Zidonian, and Hittites. Okay, so Solomon was noted for loving many foreign women. Now, that's in 1 Kings 11. Let's see what happened in 1 Kings 12, verse 1. And Rehoboam went to Shechem, for all Israel will come to Shechem to make him king. And it came to pass when Jeroboam, the son of Nebat, who was yet in Egypt, heard of it, for he was fled from the presence of King Solomon, and Jeroboam dwelt in Egypt, that they sent and called him. And Jeroboam and all the congregation of Israel came and spoke unto Rehoboam, saying, now remember, Rehoboam is Solomon's son. Let's see what Israel tells Rehoboam after we read Solomon's love of foreign women. Thy father made our yoke grievous. Now therefore make thou the grievous. Now therefore make thou the grievous service of thy father, and the heavy yoke which he hath put on us lighter, and we will serve thee. Hold on. Hold on a second. Something happened. Excuse me.
No, go ahead, take your time, bro.
No, I'm trying to see where brothers is getting the concept of wanting snow bunnies. Because Solomon in the scriptures, when you start talking about, well, David and what he did, Tobit says they were blessed in their children. David's children was not a blessing to him. If you know what really happened with his sons, Adoniah was off the wall. Absalom was sleeping with David's wives. That's not a blessed baby. You understand? When David was dying, Adoniah, whose mama was not an Israelite, was going around saying, I'm the king, and Solomon had to just be put in by order of David, and Adoniah eventually got killed by Solomon. Amnon raped his sister Tamar in the scriptures. So you done had rapists, insurrection, killings, because Absalom had Amnon killed after Amnon raped their sister Tamar. Solomon had Adoniah killed after Adoniah wanted to try to take the kingdom from Solomon. So when you look at Tobit 4 verse 12, and it says about being with women of your nation and a blessing coming, David's children is an example that, yeah, they Israel, they from the house of Judah, but that is not a blessing. Look at the behavior, O house of Israel. So Solomon, Rehoboam's mama, was not an Israelite. She was an Ammonite woman, not of the 12 tribes of Israel. And Solomon was noted for loving foreign women. And the Israelites told Rehoboam, your father's image to us is not good. Make the yoke lighter. What am I pointing out? You can't be a quote said black man and loving women of the other nations and still love your people, because Solomon loved women from the other nations. In the next chapter, after his death, talks about how his character was. See, Schlossberg and Weinstein ain't going to claim that about Solomon. They see Solomon as like a great king and a prophet. So we don't talk about that because of that. Israel, on the other hand, we not setting like my father and mother, but we talk about what our mothers and fathers did. That was not good. So we don't make that same mistake. You understand? He who hideth his transgression is of lying lips. Don't hide it. What happened? You bring it out before the Most High does. You don't want it to be coming to pass when the Most High expose you. When the Most High gives you time to repent. See your homeboy? See that Bible that he shot? The word of the Most High he shot? See what the Most High did. Maybe you thought by shooting the Bible, bro, that you was going to shut down the word of the Most High. The word in Hebrew is dabal. The same word means thing. The word or the thing of the Most High should come to pass. In the Masoretic text, in the KJV, in Tyndale's and Gideon's version, the word of the Most High is still going to come to pass. Whether you have this KJV right here, or you got this book, which is just the Torah right here. So we want to point that out. See, in closing out this, we want to emphasize that particular matter, if we will. Let's continue on in this particular case. The Romans defeated the Greeks in 146 BCE. Pompey of Rome captured Jerusalem in 63 BCE. The Edomites during this time were anticipating their move into the land of Israel. Because you got to remember, Rome and Edom made a league together, right? In 66 to 73 AD or CE, there was a very bloody war in which thousands of Israelites were slain. Many Israelites were crucified. The Roman general Vespasian captured Jericho, and his son Titus razed the city of Jerusalem and burnt the temple. Though some accounts attempt to state Titus didn't want to burn the temple, he did not, at the same token, try to stop it. Israelites were taken captive into Egypt since the days of the Greek Empire. In Josephus, we read this account. But when Ptolemy, meaning Ptolemy the First, had taken a great many captives, both from the mountainous parts of Judea and from the places about Jerusalem and Samaria and the places around Mount Gerizim, he led them all into Egypt and settled them there. Nay, there were not also other Jews also of their own accord who went into Egypt, as invited by the goodness of the soil and by the liberality of Ptolemy. Let's go on. We see here that Israelites were taken to Egypt and some settled on their own. In the Apocrypha, 2 Maccabees 1, the brethren, the Jews that be in Jerusalem and in the land of Judea, wish unto the brethren, the Jews that are throughout Egypt, health and peace. God be gracious unto you, and remember his covenant that he made with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, his faithful servants. Since the days of Solomon, king of Israel, Israel have been going to African places. The Bible in 1 Kings tells us that Solomon married a daughter of Pharaoh. Some say this was to keep peace between the kingdoms. Why will the Israelites, who were noted for going to African places, go to Europe and become these people, as we see today, claiming our identity? Why will the Israelites in great droves go north when an enemy stronger than them is coming from the north? They will go south. During this time, when Rome was coming up, we see the religion of Judaism coming into effect. It came into effect after the temple was destroyed in 70 AD. We see the temples of the rabbis, Hillel and others, and thus we see the use of the Talmud. This was after the tribes of Israel were scattered from their land, certainly as a kingdom. History shows that the Emperor Hadrian of Rome stated that any Israelite coming back into the land of Israel would be killed. The world knows our history, but our people do not know where we fit in. Hopefully, this presentation helps. The next people to attack the Israelites in droves were the Arabs. The Arabs were spreading Islam as far as they can go, China, Romania, and even Ghana. In 627 AD, as pointed out by Rudolf Windsor in his book From Babylon to Timbuktu, the Arabs attacked the Ashanti people, forcing them to convert to Islam. The same was done to the Mandinka tribe in the 11th century AD. When the Israelites fled out of the land of Israel and went to Western Africa, the dreaded prophecy of Deuteronomy 28 followed up. Some of the great empires the Israelites established in Western Africa were the Songhai, Zegzag, Nufa, and Oyo. These empires came up when the Israelites fled into Western Africa and fell when the Arabs and the Europeans entered. In the 5th century BCE, the Portuguese set off the slave trade. As early as 1501, black people were seen in Haiti as slaves. Cristobal Colombre, aka Christopher Columbus, an Italian Jew working for the Spanish, Isabella and Ferdinand, set sail in 1492. Black people were imported to Europe at a rate of 1,000 a year. In 1646 AD, black people were brought to New Amsterdam, which is now known as New York. Yes, black people were sold as slaves in Manhattan, New York in 1646. Is it odd that 1646 is an area code in New York City? What are they memorializing? The Spaniards of fame brought blacks to Jamaica early in the 16th century. The slave trade in Jamaica became rife in the middle of the 17th century. The English, Spanish, Dutch, Portuguese, French, Danes, and Irish all had their hand in the enslavement of our people. Jamaica the island was colonized by the Spaniards in 1509 and taken over by the British in 1655. There was in Jamaica slavery, the people from the Igbo and Ashanti. According to Mavis Campbell in her book, The Maroons of Jamaica, the blacks who were captive in Jamaica took to the mountains and fought 3 wars against the European colonial powers, 1655, 1731, and 1796. The coffee plantations in Jamaica, the Blue Mountains. It is said that plantations were intentionally designed for surveillance of slave activities. The Spanish Succession War, which caused England to be a dominant power in Europe. England gained control from Gambia to the Congo regarding the asiento. The asiento is a legal slave document that granted European powers legal, not righteous, but legal status to capture our ancestors. Jamaica was the main port, and many in the thousands were shipped there. That, brothers and sisters, is estimated by Du Bois that 40,000 to 100,000 a year to Jamaica alone. And many brought to what we call the United States. The English controlled Jamaica, the Bahamas, Antigua, St. Kitts, Barbuda, Nevis, Montserrat, Dominica, St. Lucia, St. Vincent, Barbados, Trinidad, first controlled by the Spanish, Tobago, and the Virgin Islands. The French controlled Guadeloupe and Martinique. The Spanish controlled Cuba, Puerto Rico, and Santo Domingo. The Dutch controlled St. Martin, St. Eustatius, and Cocao. If I pronounce, correct me if I'm wrong. The Danes controlled St. Thomas, St. John, and St. Croix. The captive markets in South America were not closed. The Portuguese controlled Brazil. The Spanish controlled Colombia, Venezuela, Peru, Chile, and Argentina. The English controlled Guyana. In Central America, the Spanish controlled Mexico or Mexico, Panama or Panama, and Honduras. The French controlled Canada and the lower Midwestern portion of what is the United States today until they were defeated in the French-American War. The Spanish controlled Texas, Florida, California, Nevada, and New Mexico. Brothers and sisters, we want to close out, but want to state this, if we will. Massachusetts, talking about now in North America, was the first state to recognize slavery legally in 1641, Connecticut 1650, Virginia 1661, Maryland 1663, New York and New Jersey 1664, South Carolina 1682, Rhode Island and Pennsylvania 1700, North Carolina 1750, and Georgia 1715, in North Carolina, and Georgia in 1750. New York and New Jersey imported over 4,000 slaves over the period from 1715 to 1767. So much for the land of the free and the home of the brave, including out. We are saying that our ancestors that were brought to these places are by blood and seed line, because you never read in the scriptures about, quote, the blood of Israel. Are you a blood descendant? We are saying we are the seed line descendants, because blood don't make people. Seed makes people. So we're not saying blood descendants like they try to say. We say seed line, like Deuteronomy mentions the word seed. Jeremiah mentions the word seed. They try to take seed out the place and then talk to you about blood, knowing that they mix their blood with everybody else. This man is the serpent. So Israel, we know what our portion is: to do justly, love mercy, and walk humbly with the Most High. They have healed the hurt of the daughters of Zion, saying, peace, peace, where there is no peace. The black woman, the daughter of Zion, is left as a besieged city in Isaiah chapter 1. Besieging her are pedophiles. We ain't going to kill that subject. Besieging her are people who want to get them drunk because you don't know how to deal with a grown woman. And the daughter of Zion is left as a besieged city, says Isaiah chapter 1. We can't build a nation without our sisters and our women. It don't make you no simp. It don't make you no coward. And it don't make you no chump. To respect, to love, and to cherish the blessing the Most High has given you and your wife, your courtmate, wife-to-be, etc. With that, I say thank you for the time. Shalom. Yes, Keith Jenkins, we mean to tell you that. Shalom.
I'm sorry, I'm running my mouth and I forgot I was on mute. Hey man, great lesson, brother. As always, all praise to the Most High. You know, and that's what we're about over here, to edify the people. You know, and what to say, take the meat, spit out the bones, lack of a better term. And I always ask a few questions to anyone that comes on. You know, and I'm just happy you came on. Wonderful lesson. Wonderful lesson. So I have a few questions. If anybody else have a question, please put in the comment section, because I have to go. I mean, I would love to stay a little longer, but I got to go. I got to take care of something. We mentioned that the chart is off, which we definitely know the chart is off. You got Israelites themselves that carry the chart out with them, say that the chart is off. And I find that I'm like, wow, you actually, but you still take it out. You know, hold on. Okay. You mentioned Israel being black and all that, and we know that. One second. Being black, we know that. And we talk about the seed line. And we should understand what it's talking about when they say the seed line. And we know Joseph, when he got with them women, they were black, right? And this is the danger that we're dealing with when we allow other people to teach the word of the Father, and they not of that seed line, or they are mixed seeded You know, and I'm glad you brought out about Rehoboam and a mixed seated, because now you got people saying Samson was a Latino, right? I was like, wow. And it's not to talk down on any ethnic group, because we have a lot of people that's so-called black or Negro who are committing heinous crimes, okay, and lying, just as wicked as other nations. And for me, like I said, anybody wants to serve the Father, that's between them and the Father. I don't have nothing to do with that. Okay. Now let's get on the question I have at hand. I hope I dressed it up a little bit. You said the seed of the Father. So my question is, when we read Numbers 1 through 18, and I think a lot of times, a lot of groups, they just stick with Numbers, and they just stick with number 18. And you know, my brother, as well as when Israel went to fight in different wars, they would number the tribes, right? This tribe sent 5,000, this tribe sent 6,000, so on and so forth, because all tribes wasn't the same size. So they sent different numbers of troops for war. So reading Numbers chapter 1 all the way to 18, let me read. I read a couple of scriptures that I'll let you explain to the brothers and sisters what you meant by the seed of the Father, because we know in Deuteronomy 7th chapter, right, that it tells us we are not to mix with them at all. We know what Ezra said, supposed to give them children and the wives away. We know what Nehemiah spoke about, right? And we're not supposed to give our sons and daughters to the other nations. So Numbers chapter 1, verse 18, and reads on this wise. Just had it, excuse me. It says this. Verse 1. And the Most High spake unto Moses in the wilderness of Sinai, in the tabernacle of the congregation. That's key word to me. It says comma. It says congregation. On the first day of the second month in the second year after they were come out of the land of Egypt. Key word for me in that verse 1 was congregation. Verse 2. Take ye the sum of all the congregation. Key word congregation of the children of Israel. Two words, children in Israel. Third word, congregation. Start from verse 2 again. Take ye the sum of all the congregation of the children of Israel after their families, by the house of their fathers, with the number of their names, every male by their poles. Key word again in verse 2 is congregation, right? The children of Israel. Take number according to the fathers in the congregation of the children of Israel. Verse 3, from 20 years old and upward, all that are able to go forth to war in Israel, though an Aaron shall number them by their armies. Verse 4, and with you there shall be a man of every tribe, not of a nations, not of a congregations, not different women, different men. And with you there shall be a man of every tribe, every one head of the house of his father, because the man or the men are the leaders, 20 years old. Verse 5, and these are the names of the men that shall stand with you of the tribe of Reuben. And it names them because they all came from Israelite, the congregation. And in verse 18, skip the names of all tribes, and I just skip down to verse 17, 18. And Moshe and Aaron took these men, which are expressed by their names, the tribes from their congregation of Israel. And they assemble all the congregation, verse 18, key word to me. And they assemble all the congregation together on the first day of the second month, and they declared their pedigree after their families by the house of their fathers, according to the number of the name from 20 years old. Now, my understanding of that scripture from 1 through 18, they name the tribes in the congregation and in Israel. And my thought process, or what I get out of that, is that this is speaking to the Israelites, the congregation in Israel, and talking about the tribes. And the teaching is that Israel could go bang out another woman, and that's saying the seed of the father, but they're not reading 1 through 18. So I got a phone call, brother, say, brother doing a great lesson, but what do you mean by we are the seed of our father? I believe he's talking about seed of father in the tribe. I don't think he's talking about we being with other nations, but I'll let the brother clarify for himself. If anybody have another question, please answer. Say it in the chat, and the brother will answer it to best his ability. Most High bless. Just waiting for your answer.
Okay, shalom. Shalom, can I be heard?
Shalom, Most High bless. Yes, sir. Yes, brother.
All right. If I'm hearing you right, Elder, you're saying to me that according to the houses of their fathers. So let's say, just taking a tribe, a man from the tribe of Reuben, he's an Israelite, and he has a wife from the tribe of Simeon. That child is an Israelite. Is what if I'm hearing you right?
Yeah, that's what I would. Well, we're only supposed, according to what I read, and I can't think of the verse, we're only supposed to mix tribes. It tells us not even mix tribes. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
All right, let me try to give an answer from what I studied on that and so forth. But I appreciate the question. Sure. If I'm hearing and understanding you right from what you're saying, if a man from the tribe of Reuben has a wife that is from the Assyrians, that child is not an Israelite.
Well, I'm not saying anything. I'm just going by what I read in verse 18 when it said, 1 through 18. Yeah. I'm just asking you to answer. I'm just asking you to answer from what I read in Numbers, because it didn't. When I read Numbers 1 through 18, it didn't mention Assyrians, it didn't mention Babylonians.
Right.
It mentioned from the congregation of the children of Israel.
Right. And so when we look at congregation and according to the number by their polls, you mentioned according there in verse 2, Polls. The word polls in Hebrew means by their pedigrees, means by what they give an account for. So they got to be able, in this particular case, to be able to state their father would be from this pedigree, from this poll, from this lineage, from this line. So that's when that particular case. When we read in the law about a tribe going into another tribe, there is no law that says any Israelite tribe cannot have a child with another Israelite tribe. What happens in Leviticus 25 is if the daughter of a priest who is of the house of Levi or Levi, if she marries somebody from Judah or Dan, whatever her father had for her, she lost that. Because that now goes to her husband's side of the family. So she becomes a part of, not linearly, not through the seed line of her dad being of the house of Levi. But what happens in this particular case is whatever portion she has as the daughter of a priest of the house of Levi, if she marries an Israelite from a different tribe of Israel, she no longer has that. Israelites have stated sometimes that no Israelite tribe, say Manasseh, is not supposed to marry Ephraim and so forth. That was never a law. And how we know that to be the case is because when Benjamin was almost wiped out in Judges, the men of the other tribes gave their daughters to Benjamin men, so Benjamin can be rebuilt through their own daughters in Judges. So now land-wise and keeping your my family tribal thing, that's why a lot of times you won't see a lot of tribal mixing even in Israel. The daughters of Zelophehad or Zelophehad in Numbers, when they married their first cousins, so the land won't be moved from tribe to tribe, is why a lot of people in the ancient world would never marry outside their tribe, because you're not moving my father's land off. That's why a lot of that was done in that case. And I know we are in agreement that we don't go in to other nations talking about so forth and so on. I have
Right.
never heard anybody saying that Samson was Latino.
Yeah, they
I
saying that,
know
though, bro.
Samson wasn't recorded as being a dad. I know he had 2 Philistine women, but his life and his mission was totally different from the womb.
Yeah,
So
they actually saying that, brother. I was like, wow, you know, they're actually saying that. Hey, look, man, I want to stay a little longer, but I remember I told you I got to, yeah. Hey, look, thanks for coming on. And look, Most High will come back so we can actually have this discussion. Oh, and you know what? Before I let you go, can you let everybody know where they can find your books?
All right. Not doing the sales on the Shabbat. I hope everybody waits till after. But all of them, I'm gonna type in the my email again, and all of the books is on Amazon. So you'll go the English name that's there. I'll type that in as well. If you type that in, that's the English name there. You can sit there and see all that on Amazon. But again, wait till after Shabbat for that. You can email me about that particular matter, and I appreciate the love and the support.
Okay, hallelujah. So that's your email. Okay, why? Okay, I see it. Okay, hallelujah. That's email. This is a wonderful brother. And like I said, man, anybody come on this platform, I don't necessarily have to agree with everything that you say, but we will be critiquing, because we could be wrong too, but we will be critiquing everything that somebody bring out. That's just how we operate over here, but we do it in love and not disrespect. And this is how we're supposed to roll. You know, you don't have to come over. You're still my brother, and we don't have to agree for you to be my brother. You know, but we will talk about that again, go over that in numbers again, because we've done a breakdown on that. But other than that, brother, man, I really appreciate what you did. It was a great lesson, great understanding, and I hope people got edified with that. I may come back on later on tonight to discuss this and other topics. So Most High bless y'all. Hope y'all enjoyed the class, the lesson, and everybody stay strong, man. Lima, Star, Brother Abraham, King Judah, Tracy, your beautiful wife. Everybody, man. Most High blessed, man. The haters, man, keep on hating, man. You could put a bunch of dislikes or likes. It doesn't matter. At the end of the day, the Most High is our judge, you know. But yeah, stay strong. Shabbat shalom. Stay strong, man. This is F.O.P.E, man, for our people edification. Again, brother, thanks for coming on. Hey, look, you got to make that trip down here, man, because you're supposed to be at the crib.
Yeah. Situations unforeseen. We had to stay, you know, and couldn't make it out to DC. But we definitely got each other's number, and we definitely want to make that move. Most God bless.
No doubt. And man, and everybody, I want y'all to know, man, we doing a Negro only Qanath, and the Brotherhood or F.O.P. We doing a Negro only gathering, right? So if you're not Negro, and no disrespect, right? But I like rubber arms with my brothers and sisters, man. Just like that. Point blank. If you don't like me for that, then kick rocks. All right. But we doing a Negro only gathering, man, that loves the Father. You can't be Negro and talk about, I love. You gotta respect what the scriptures say. So with that, man, thanks again for coming on, man. Most High bless y'all, man. Shalom.